Hello everyone. Now let's see section 23, and that is persons not liable for registration. Who are these people who are not required to take registration? Let's see. So again, a simple theory question can come on this. The following persons shall not be liable to registration. A. Any person engaged exclusively, means completely 100% exclusively, in the business of supplying goods or services or both that are not liable to tax. Simple, na? If you supply something which is not liable to tax, then you are not required to take registration, or are wholly exempt from tax. So not liable means, like, say for example, you are supplying alcoholic liquor. So if you are a dealer of alcoholic liquor, you are not required to take registration under GST because you are not liable. Number two, you are liable, you are supplying some goods or services, but they are wholly exempt from tax under this act or under the Integrated Goods and Service Tax Act. Means it is not liable. Like say for example, I am supplying books. So books are not liable to GST. They are totally exempt. And as far as services are concerned, we have seen the long list of services which are totally exempt. So if you are supplying some goods or a service which is absolutely exempt, completely exempt, wholly exempt under GST, then you don't need registration. Then B, agriculturist. Wow, agriculturists don't require to take registration to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land. Means if your supply is only that produce that you cultivate in your land and you supply it, then you are not required to take registration. But if you supply something else also which is liable to tax, then of course you will have to take registration. And what is the meaning of agriculturist? That is also given there. Section 1 clause 7 defines agriculturist, and it says it means an individual or an HUF who undertakes cultivation of land. So it doesn't include companies. Agriculturist means only individual or HUF who cultivates land by his own labor, means you cultivate by your own labor, or by the labor of his family, means your family is also involved, or by servants on wages payable in cash or kind, or by hired labor under personal supervision or the personal supervision of any member of the family. Means you can employ labor also, but they should be your personal labor. It should not be that you have let out the land. Okay, if you lease out your land and somebody else is doing the farming or agriculture, then you are not agriculturist. Thus, an agriculturist is not liable for registration only to the extent of supply of produce out of cultivation of land. If the agriculturist undertakes supplies which are not linked to cultivation of land, he will fall within the provisions of section 22 and may have to take registration in respect of such supplies. Obviously. Then point number 2 says the government may, on the recommendation of the council, by notification specify category of persons who may be exempted from obtaining registration under this act. So this is an open clause which gives power to the government to prescribe people from time to time who will be exempted from registration. And that whole list covering various notifications is given there. Following category of persons have been notified as exempt from obtaining registration. A lot of them are there. You have to just go through this list maybe once or twice and try to remember a few of them to be written as examples in the question. Person making only reverse charge supplies. Persons who are only engaged in making supplies of taxable goods or services of both the total tax on which is liable to be paid on reverse charge basis by the recipient. So you are supplier, you are supplying to recipient, and the recipient is chargeable under RCM So the supplier is not required to do anything. He's not required to do anything now because he's not going to pay any tax. So he is exempted. So this supplier will be exempted from registration. And who will have to register himself? This recipient will have to register himself because he is liable to pay tax. So he requires compulsory registration. But the supplier will be totally exempted. Then second is casual taxable person making supplies of handicraft goods. Now we saw that casual taxable person normally requires registration, but here it is given that they supply, if they supply handicraft goods, handmade goods, then they are exempted. So that is given there, that as per section 24, which we saw in the last lecture, a casual taxable person or a person making interstate supplies are liable for registration compulsorily, right? CTP as well as interstate seller, they are always liable to registration, irrespective of the threshold limit. However, casual taxable person making taxable supplies of handicraft goods or persons making interstate supply of handicraft goods have been exempted from registration. Now in this notification they have also defined the nature of handicraft goods, but I have not given it here because you are not required to go through that whole list, because anyways you are not going to understand anything. The above exemption is available provided the aggregate value of such supply to be computed on all India basis does not exceed an amount of 20 lakh and 10 lakh in case of special category states other than Jammu and Kashmir in a financial year. Now this notification is also an old one, so therefore the old limits are given 20 lakh and 10 lakh. Now the government will have to revise this notification to cover the new limits that we saw. Then casual taxable person making taxable supply of handicraft goods or persons making interstate supplies of handicraft goods shall require to obtain PAN and generate an e-way bill. Obviously they will require a PAN and they have to generate an e-way bill for such supply. Exemption is available to CTP who are making interstate taxable supplies of handicraft goods and are availing the benefit of exemption from registration. Handicraft goods means the product specified in the respective notifications when made by the craftsmen predominantly by hand, even though some machinery may also be used in the process. So these are different notifications that are there. But okay, you just have to remember supplier of handicraft goods. Then third is job workers making interstate supply of services to a registered person. Job worker engaged in making interstate supply of service to a registered person have been exempted. Though interstate are compulsorily required registration, but if you are a job worker and you are providing interstate supply of service for job work, then you are exempted. But nothing contained in this notification shall apply to a job worker. Nothing contained in notification shall apply to a job worker means he will be required registration. Who is liable to be registered under 22(1) means his own turnover has exceeded the specified threshold limit. So if you are a job worker also and you have your own turnover also, the goods that you produce on your own account and supply, and that turnover exceeds the limits, then of course you will be required registration. Or who opts to take voluntary registration. If you are taking voluntary registration, you are welcome, there is no problem. Or who is involved in making supply of service in relation to jewellery, goldsmiths and silversmiths wares and other articles which are provided in chapter 71 of tariff. So if you are providing job work in relation to gold and silver and other jewelry items, then you will have to get yourself registered compulsorily. So that was 23, a very simple one. And then comes the procedure for registration. This is the complete procedure, means what steps you have to take in order to register yourself. So this is again a very simple one, and you just have to go through it once or twice and try to remember the whole process. A few charts are also given in the book for easy revision. So section 25 says that where and by when to apply for registration. Means where do you have to apply and what is the time of application. So that is given there. Persons who are liable, person who is liable to be registered under section 22 or 24, then casual taxable person or a non-resident taxable person will have to apply in every such state or union territory in which he is so liable. Where will you apply? Where will you apply? In the state or union territory where you are liable to pay tax. And what is the time? Within 30 days from the date on which he becomes liable to registration. Means, for example, you cross the threshold limit. So the day you cross the threshold limit, you become liable. So from that day, in the next 30 days, you can make an application for registration. And the casual taxable person or NRTP, non-resident taxable person, will have to make an application within at least 5 days prior to the commencement of business. These are temporary registrations. Casual taxable person means a person who is going to go to another state and sell goods for a few number of days and then come back. So he has to make an application at least 5 days prior. Okay, 5 days prior to commencement of his business. Then every person who makes a supply from the territorial waters of India, if you are making supply from territorial waters of India, then you have to make an application in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located. Means from ships, you have your ship and you make a supply from that ship itself. So you have come from outside India, say, and your ship is standing in the territorial waters of India somewhere, and from there you are making supply. So the point is that in which state you are liable to register, in which state. So we'll see the nearest point to the appropriate baseline. Baseline means the coast. So suppose you are standing here, let's take an example that this is the coastal India, right? Not the complete India, but the coastal India. Now here is the Gujarat state. From here to here is Gujarat. Then there is Maharashtra. Then there is Goa. Then there is Karnataka. And then there is Kerala. And on this side there is Tamil Nadu. Then there is Andhra Pradesh. Then there is Orissa. And there is West Bengal. I don't know whether I missed anyone. My geography was not that good in school, but okay, this much I think is fine. Now your ship has come from, say, Dubai and is standing somewhere here in the territorial waters. It is standing there, and from there you are making the supply. So we'll see which state you will have to make an application. That we have to find out that which state you can make an application for registration, because you are standing in the territorial waters. So we'll see the nearness. Are you near to the Gujarat coast, or you are near to the Maharashtra coast? Which is nearer? So here you are at, say, 3 kilometers away, and from Maharashtra you are 7 kilometers away. So your nearness is Gujarat. So you'll have to make an application for registration in Gujarat. Interesting one. Right? So in the coastal state or union territory where the nearest point of appropriate baseline is located. Time is the same, 30 days from the date on which he becomes liable for registration. Example is also given that Sugam Services Limited is engaged in taxable supplier service in Madhya Pradesh. The turnover exceeded 20 lakh. Now, of course, it will be 40 lakhs. On 1st of November, it is liable to get registered by 1st of December in the state of Madhya Pradesh. So this is 30 days and in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Very simple. Then second point says state-wise registration is there. So one registration per state. Registration needs to be taken state-wise. That is, there is no centralized registration under GST like it was in the old service tax. So in service tax, if you had multiple offices across India, you could have taken one single registration at which your centralized billing system is located. But in GST, we cannot do. If we have multiple businesses in multiple states, we will require separate registration in each state. Okay. So it is a state-wise registration. A business entity having its branches in multiple states will have to take separate state-wise registration for the branches in different states, provided that a person having multiple places of business in a state or union territory. Now, if you have multiple places in a single state, then what? May be granted separate registration for each such place of business subject to conditions as may be prescribed. So then there is a choice. You can have one registration or you can have separate registrations. I've got 5 shops all in Maharashtra. Then I can take a single registration for all the shops, or I can go for separate registrations also. Such person shall be granted separate registration in respect of each such place of business subject to following conditions, namely, such person has more than one place of business as defined in the place of business definition. Such person shall not pay tax under section 10 for any of his place of business if he is paying tax under section 9 for any other place of business. Means, say I have got 5 shops all in Maharashtra. I can go for separate registrations, but I cannot pay tax in a different manner. Like from 2 shops, I will say that I will pay tax under section 9 normal rate, and for 3 shops I will pay composition tax, composition levy under section 10. That cannot happen. So if you are taking separate registrations, you can take, but 2 options will be there. Either you pay tax under normal method section 9 for all your branches, or composition levy for all the branches. And thirdly, all separately registered place of business of such person shall pay tax under the Act on supply of goods or service of both made to another registered place. Means, if you have inter-branch transfers and you have separate registrations, then you have to pay tax as if you supply to another person. So my branch A, my Mumbai branch, supplies some goods to my Pune branch. It will be considered as a normal supply and we have to pay tax as if we have sold to a third party. And issue a tax invoice or a bill of supply as the case may be for such supply. We'll have to issue a normal invoice as we issue to any other person, or a bill of supply. If the goods are exempt, then we have to issue a bill of supply. So 3 conditions are there. You should have more than one place of business as defined in the term place of business. Second point, that you have to pay tax from all your branches either under section 9 or under section 10 as the case may be, if available. And if you have supply within your branches, it will be considered as a normal supply and you will have to pay normal tax and issue an invoice also. And for the purposes of clause B, it is hereby clarified that where any place of business of a registered person that has been granted a separate registration becomes ineligible to pay tax under section 10. Section 10 let a lot of conditions for composition levy. So if you become ineligible for even one branch, all other registered place of business of the said person shall become ineligible under the said section. Means, if you become ineligible in one of the branches, all the other branches will also become ineligible, because you cannot have 2 options now. You cannot have section 9 in one branch and section 10 in another branch. So if you are out of section 10 even from one branch, you will be out from all your premises. And the registered person opting to obtain separate registration for a place of business shall submit a separate application in REG1, the registration form, in respect of such place of businesses. So as I told you that it is optional. Okay, it is optional to have separate. So if this is one state, say for example Maharashtra, and you have got several places of business here, you have got two options, either to take separate registrations or you can have one registration. But if you have one branch or several branches in Maharashtra and some branches in UP, then it is compulsory to have separate registrations. If the other branch is in another state or union territory, then it is compulsory to have separate registrations. But for one state or one union territory, it is optional. And the provisions of Rule 9 and 10 relating to verification and grant of registration shall mutatis mutandis apply to applications submitted under this rule. So these we'll see in due course of time. There's a whole verification process. After you make an application, there's a whole process which takes place. Your PAN number is checked, your mobile number, your email ID, everything is checked and verified. So those things will remain same. Mutatis mutandis means in the same manner to all your registrations. Then registration under composition levy. If one of the business verticals of a taxable person, now these days they don't call it as business vertical, they have removed this definition of business vertical. It means another business. So you just write down if one of the businesses, strike off this word vertical. So it says if one of the business of a taxable person is paying tax under normal levy, no other business vertical, means no other business, shall be granted registration to pay tax under composition levy. This we saw just now. Whatever number of businesses you have, whether they are in the same line or they are different businesses, it doesn't matter. I've got one cement shop and then there is one steel shop and one furniture shop, whatever it may be. If they are with the same PAN number, if I am obtaining registrations with the same PAN number, that is of Farooq Haque, then either I pay section 9 normal tax for all my registered premises or section 10. And further it says that if one of the business which is separately registered becomes ineligible to pay tax under composition levy, all other business would also become so ineligible, obviously. And Rule 9 and 10 shall mutatis mutandis apply. Then, voluntary registration. A person who is not liable to be registered under 22 or 24. 24 is compulsory, 22 means when your turnover crosses the threshold limit. So it says that if you are not liable under any of these sections, means your turnover is say around about 5 or 6 lakhs only, may get himself registered voluntarily. You may still go and take registration voluntarily. And in such case, all provisions of the Act as are applicable to a registered person shall apply to voluntary registered person also. So you become liable in the same manner. All provisions will apply to you also. However, once a person obtains voluntary registration, he has to pay tax even though his aggregate turnover does not exceed the threshold limit. The old limit were 2010, now it can be 40 also. So it can be 40 or 20 or 10 as the case may be. Okay, so once you take voluntary registration, you become liable to pay tax. So why should one take voluntary registration? A good question. Why should you take voluntary registration? Now if you remember, some days back I had explained a concept that I had explained this concept for composition levy, I think. That if you are one of the person in the mid of the chain, then you should take registration and you should pay normal tax. You should not pay even the composition tax. Because the chain is very important. The ITC which is there, the input tax credit, that passes on through each node of the chain. So every person should be liable to pay tax, then only the credit is passed on. So suppose if you are one of the persons in the chain, okay, and your threshold limit is not crossed. So if you don't take registration, then what will happen is that the credit which has been passed on up to you, means your supplier passes on the credit to you, passes on the GST to you. But if you are not registered and you don't pay tax, then that old credit is lost. It cannot be passed on any further. So therefore, let me explain it again to you, that if this is person A, this is person B, this is person C, and this is person D. A supplies to B, B supplies to C, C supplies to D. Now this person C is having a turnover of only, means less than threshold limit. So he is not required registration because his turnover is below the limit. But A charges 120 GST, passes it on to B. B charges 200. So he sets off 120, taking it as credit, and pays 80 rupees to the government, right? Now he supplies goods to C. If C is not registered, then when he supplies to D, he will not charge any GST. So D doesn't have any credit, no ITC. But D is again a big person, so his turnover is much more than the limit. So he is registered and he has to pay tax. So if his tax is 300, he will not have any credit. So these two amounts which have already been paid by A and B, that is 120 and 80, are lost. This credit cannot be passed on to D, and D cannot take set off. Okay, D cannot take set off because C is not paying any tax. So therefore, C should go and take voluntary registration. If he takes voluntary registration and suppose his GST comes to 250, it's fine. It's still fine because he will take credit of this 200, pay 50 rupees, and this 250 will then be allowed as credit to D. So he'll get credit of 250 and he will pay only 50 rupees to the government. So the chain gets connected and the credit, the old credit also gets passed on. So therefore, C should take voluntary registration. Means every person who is at the intermediate level in the chain, not the last person, but one of the intermediate person in the chain, must take registration, must pay full tax. He should not even claim the composition levy, because in composition levy, the credit is lost. Simple. Then another point is there, distinct persons or establishments of distinct persons. This is simple. A person who has obtained or is required to obtain more than one registration, whether in one state or more than one state or union territory, shall in respect of each such registration be treated as distinct persons. So if I have taken 6 registrations, if Farooq Haque class has got 6 registrations, then these 6 will be called as distinct persons. Further, where a person who has obtained or is required to obtain registration in a state or union territory in respect of an establishment has an establishment in another state. So if I have got one registered premises in Nagpur and I have got one another premise in Delhi, which may not be registered, but they will still be called as distinct persons. So that is also very simple, nothing much in that. Then PAN is a must for obtaining registration. This is very important. PAN number is required. Without PAN you will not get GST registration. But NRTP may be granted registration on the basis of other prescribed documents. NRTP means the non-resident taxable person. So non-resident taxable person who doesn't have a fixed establishment in India may not have a PAN in India. So no problem, government says that okay, we can grant you registration on the basis of some other document. Then unique identity number is there, which is allotted to United Nations and multilateral financial organizations or organizations as notified under the United Nations Privileges and Immunities Act of 1947, then consulate or embassy of foreign countries and any other person notified by the commissioner. So these people are not liable for tax, but they can claim refund of input tax. Whatever purchases they make and the tax is levied on them, they can take refund. So for that purpose, they are granted a special identification number that is called as unique identification number. Then UIN is needed for claiming refund, as I told you, for claiming refund of tax paid on notified goods or goods and or services received by them, and for such other purposes as may be notified, but basically for refund. So it's a control number. Then such person shall file an application in different prescribed form. There's a different form for them, and UIN shall be assigned by the proper officer upon submission of the application in said form, and after filling up the said form, and after receiving a recommendation from the Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. So their form will be approved by the Ministry of External Affairs. And registration certificate shall be issued within 3 working days from the date of submission of application. That is procedure. Then there is a suo motu registration by the proper officer. It says that where pursuant to any survey, inquiry, inspection, search or other proceeding under the Act, the proper officer finds that a person liable to registration under the Act has failed to apply for such registration. So there is a big shop owner, he never applied for registration, but one day the inspector went there and inspected his premises and found that his turnover was much more than the prescribed limit. So he asked, have you got registration under GST? So the shop owner says, what is GST? What is GST? I don't know any GST. Huh? You have not taken and you have not applied for registration? He says, no, I don't know anything like that. My chartered accountant Farooq Haque is there. He should know. I don't know. Of course, I am not his chartered accountant, okay? But he has not taken. So what the officer will do? He says, okay, I am going to grant you a registration number by myself. So that is given there, that the officer may register the said person on a temporary basis. Okay, this is called as temporary registration, and then he will ask that person to give all the documents and apply for registration, and then a full registration will be granted. Then it is given there that such person thereafter, after he is given the temporary registration, what he can do, shall either submit an application for registration in the prescribed form within 90 days of temporary registration, or file an appeal against the temporary registration. Means he can file a case also. Now, if he says that no, I am not liable for registration, the officer has given me a wrong registration, I am not liable, I supply only exempt goods. So okay, then you can go and challenge it in the court of law. So you can appeal. In case 2, means if he appeals, the appellate authority upholds the liability to registration. If the appellate authority says that no, you are liable, then application for registration shall be submitted within 30 days of the order of the appellate authority or tribunal. And provisions relating to verification and issue of registration certificate as contained in Rule 9 and 10 shall mutatis mutandis apply to such registration also. Those are simple points. Then comes the procedure for registration. So now let's see all the rules. We'll see. Procedure is laid down under section 25, read with Rule 8, 9, 10. Will be applicable to all persons, including persons paying tax under composition levy or persons seeking voluntary registration, as well as casual taxable person, but excluding the following persons: an RTP, then person liable to deduct tax under 51, the TDS people, then the TCS people who are liable to collect tax under 52, and a person supplying OIDAR service from outside India. So these are the persons who need not follow this procedure that we'll see. Separate procedures are laid out for them. An RTP, there is a separate procedure because they may not have PAN. Then TDS, TCS, separate procedure is there. separate registrations are there, and OIDR, because he is also a non-resident person, so they are subject to separate procedures. Then application for registration by CES unit. So it says a person having unit in CES or a CES developer will make a separate application for registration as distinct from his other units located outside SEZ. So again, you need a compulsory separate registration. Even if your SEZ unit and your normal unit are in the same state, I've got one unit in my SEZ in Pune and another unit also in Pune but outside SEZ. I will have to take separate registrations, compulsory, even if they are located in the same state. So your CES unit, or if you are a developer of CES, then as a developer you will have to take separate registration. Thus, there may be a case where two units of a taxpayer are located in the same state, one in SEZ and the other one outside SEZ. So even if it is in the same state, you will have to take separate registrations. Okay. Example is also given there. Suvarna Industries is engaged in manufacturing activities in Uttar Pradesh. It has two units in UP, one in SEZ and another outside SEZ. Under GST, one registration per state is required. However, since in this case one of the two units is in SEZ, it will make a separate application for both the units. Then application for registration by input service distributor, ISD, one who distributes credits amongst his units. He also needs a separate registration. And even though he may have, like there is a enterprise ABC company, so it is a registration, it is a normal supplier, and it also distributes credits amongst its constituent units in different states. So as an ISD, it will have to take a separate registration, and as a supplier of taxable goods or service, he needs a separate registration. So he will need two registrations. And for ISD registration, there is no threshold limit. So that is also simple. And then the procedure is given here. Procedure is given in the chart form for ease of understanding and remembering. So see, application for registration is there. First thing is application for registration, step 1. Person other than NRTP, then TDS, TCS and OIDR. So these people are not covered there, but for all others it is covered. Declaration is to be filed. So first you will file your PAN number, mobile number, email address and the state or union territory where you want registration. In part A of REG1, form number is REG1, in that there is part A. So first you will file these 4 things in part A: PAN number, mobile number, email address basically, and the name of the state. This you will do on the common portal, of course. Then what will happen, there will be a validation of email through email OTP. So you will receive an OTP on your email, you have to verify it. Then your mobile number will be verified by a mobile OTP, and your PAN number will be verified through CBDT database from the backend itself, because CBIC database is connected with CBDT database. Then a temporary reference number will be generated. Once all the 3 are verified, a number will be generated. It will be communicated on your mobile and email, and then there will be electronic submission of application in part B. So now you will fill up part B and submit it online through the common portal by electronic verification. So there will be digital signature, so you need your DSC, digital signature certificate, to verify it, and then an acknowledgement will be issued electronically in REG2. So it's a simple process. and that itself is then given in the word form also, that every person liable to be registered shall before applying for registration declare his PAN, mobile number and email ID and state or UT in part A. Then PAN number will be validated by CBDT database and mobile number and email through OTP, one-time password. Then a transaction TRN will be generated, temporary reference number, and will be given to you on your mobile and email address. Then you can file part B thereafter, and once you do that, then you will receive the acknowledgement. And for a casual taxable person, one more thing is there, that for a normal person he has to just make the application and get registered, but for casual taxable person they have to deposit advance tax also. They have to deposit advance tax, because casual taxable person means a person who is going to go to another state. Maybe he's from Orissa and he's going to go to Punjab to make some sales, right? So he's making an application for registration in Punjab. So when he does that, and he has to do it at least 5 days before he goes to Punjab, right? So he has to also mention there that what is the probable sales that he's going to make there, how much sale he's going to make, and how much GST is going to come on that sale. That is expected GST, not actual but expected, because this is expected sales. So he has to deposit that expected tax in advance along with his application for registration. So that is there. So that is given there. A CTP applying for registration gets a TRN for making an advance deposit of tax in his electronic cash ledger, and an acknowledgement is issued only after this said deposit, and then the application shall be forwarded to the proper officer. And the same thing is given in another diagram. The number of days are also given there. The proper officer issues notice electronically within 3 working days from the application date, thereby seeking clarification, information or documents from the applicant. So once we make an application, proper officer examines the application and accompanying documents. If the same are found in order, yes, then we'll go down. If no, if they're not in order, if the documents are not in order, then he will issue a notice electronically within 3 working days. After submission, he has 3 days to give you a notice that your documents are not in order, and he will mention the points of clarification or information or the documents that he needs further. Once you receive this notice, if the applicant has furnished the clarification, now it is up to you to clarify or give information or submit more documents which you ask for. You have 7 days for doing so. So you have to submit within 7 days of receiving the notice. If yes, and then the officer will again satisfy himself. If he is satisfied also yes, then within 7 days from the date of receipt of the information or clarification, he will grant registration. If everything is yes, 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 he will grant registration. If it is no, if the assessee means the applicant does not clarify within 7 days, okay, you don't clarify within 7 days, or you clarify but the officer is not satisfied with your clarifications, then he will reject your application and give reasons for rejection, okay. Or if they are in order itself, in the first instance itself, if the documents are in order, then within 3 working days from the date of submission of application, the officer will grant registration. So registration can be granted directly if everything is in order, or after verification and clarification it can be granted. And there is a concept of deemed approval also, that if the officer fails to take action within 3 working days from the date of submission of application. See, he had 3 days either to give us registration or to raise objection. If he doesn't do anything within 3 days and 3 days lapse, then we are deemed to have received registration. Registration is deemed to have been granted. Or he takes objection, the applicant submits the clarifications or the new documents, and then he doesn't take any action within next 7 days. So again, in that case, if he doesn't take action within 7 days, then the registration is deemed to have been approved. Means either these 3 days, the original 3 days, if he is satisfied, then he has got 3 days to give us registration, or if he is not satisfied, he has that 3 days to raise objection. If he doesn't do anything, then we are granted registration automatically, right? Or the 7 days, if he doesn't act within 7 days, then again the registration is deemed to have been granted. So that is also simple. And this is another simple chart is given that you can read. PAN number should be there, jurisdictional details have to be given, valid bank account should be there with IFSC code, then PAN number, authorized signatory who is resident of India, authorized signatory has to be resident of India with valid PAN, then place of business, all the valid email, PAN number, mobile number. Then physical verification. Interesting. After we are granted registration, what will happen? Let's see. Rule 25 says that where the officer is satisfied that physical verification of the place of business of a registered person is required after grant of registration. So for registration, there is no prior verification. Only document verification is done. Registration is granted. But if the officer feels that this person who has applied for registration may be lying about his place of business, it may be possible that this place of business doesn't exist. So then what the officer does, he may get such verification done, and the verification report along with other documents including photographs shall be uploaded in the prescribed form on the GST common portal within 15 working days following the date of verification. So he may ask his junior employees to go and verify. So there are verification officers in the government department, so they will go take photographs, everything, and upload it on the common portal. And issuance of certificate is there. Rule 10, GST registration 6 will be issued, and this will be given on the common portal itself. They uploaded on the common portal, and you can download it, you can print it and keep it with you, and you have to display it at a prominent location on your place of business, okay, or additional place of business, principal place of business, and at every additional place of business. All simple points. And then effective date of registration is also given. So where applicant submits the application for registration within 30 days of becoming liable to registration, then the registration is effective from the date on which he becomes liable to registration, means it is backdated. Registration may be granted on a particular day, but it will be effective right from the day when you became liable for registration. Say for example, though the example is given there, if you become liable on 13th of October, you make an application for registration within 30 days, that is on say 28th of October, and your registration is granted by the officer on say after all verification on 30th October. Okay, so registration is granted on 30th of October, but it will be effective from 13th October itself. So you can take ITC, etc., input tax credit and all, right from 13th of October. So whatever inputs you must have received in your premises on 13th October onwards, you are entitled to take the credit of this same. And if you make an application after 30 days, after he becomes liable to registration, then your registration is effective from the date of grant of registration. So in this case, what happens? That you will lose your credits because your registration will be effective from the date of grant. That is, that if the application is made, say, on 28th of November, that is more than 30 days afterwards, and granted on 30th of November, then it will be effective from 30th of November and not 13th October. And that is given there in the explanation, in the example. Then special provisions for grant of registration in case of an RTP and CTP, casual taxable person. So it says both CTP and NRTP have to compulsorily get registered under GST irrespective of threshold limit, of course, at least 5 days prior to commencement of business. At least 5 days prior. And every person must have PAN to be eligible for registration. But since an RTP will generally not have PAN in India because he is a foreigner, he may be granted registration on the basis of other prescribed documents. And what he has to do, he has to submit his self-attested copy of valid passport along with the application signed by his authorized signatory who is a Indian resident having valid PAN. So he should have an authorized signatory in India with a valid PAN. However, in case of a business entity incorporated or established outside India, the application for registration shall be submitted along with tax identification number or unique number on the basis of which the entity is identified by the government of that country or its PAN if available. That country's PAN if available. So like we have PAN in India, and the PAN is actually tax identification number. So if he is a person of, say, Mexico, then you must have similar laws in Mexico now. So Mexico government might have issued you some identification number, tax identification number. So that number you'll have to quote here. Okay. An application will be submitted by an RTP in a different prescribed form. Form is different. Whereas CTP will submit the application in the normal form. And his registration of CTP will be PAN based registration. So CTP has to give PAN. CTP is a local person, so he has to give PAN. Only NRTP, his registration will be on the basis of his foreign tax identification number of his country. Then period of validity of registration certificate. So it says granted to CTP or NRTP will be valid for period specified in the registration application. Like you had submitted that I want registration for 30 days. So it will be valid for that 30 days or 90 days from the effective date of registration. Means the maximum period will be 90 days. So you may obtain for less, and if you want to obtain for more, then there is extension. Can be extended further by a period not exceeding 90 days by making an application before the end of the validity of registration granted to him. So suppose you came here to do business of 45 days, but after 45 days you found that there are more customers and you need to do more business. Okay, you can continue up to 90, but beyond 90 you will have to make another application for extension of time, and which can be given another 90 days. Means maximum it can go up to 180 days. This is max along with extension. And provisions relating to verification of application and grant of registration under Rule 910 shall mutatis mutandis apply. Okay. Then there is advance deposit, as we had discussed some moments back. that both these people, CTP and NRTP, will have to give advance deposit of tax equivalent to estimated tax liability. Like I told you that there is a jewelry guy who is going to come to our state for selling some diamonds. So he has to give estimated sales, and on that calculated estimate tax liability and deposit it beforehand. And such person will get a TRN for making advance deposit, which shall be credited to his electronic cash ledger. Acknowledgement of receipt will be given to him. And where extension of time is sought, if you are extending your time by another 90 days, then you have to recalculate your estimated liability and deposit that also for the extension period. So all these are simple points. Then moving on to section 26, it is deemed registration. Registration under GST is not tax specific, which means that there is a single registration for all taxes, that is CGST, SGST and all. Grant of registration or UIN under SGST Act or UTGST Act is deemed to be registration under CGST Act also, and vice versa. Means if you are registered under CGST, you are automatically registered under other acts. So you can take registration in any one of them and you are automatically registered under all of them. And rejection in one will mean rejection in all also. Then special provisions for grant of registration for person liable to deduct tax at source or collect tax at source. People who are liable for TDS and TCS. So it says that they have to also make an application by submitting it in a different prescribed form on the portal, and they would be granted registration within 3 working days from the date of submission after due verification. And registration will be cancelled if the proper officer is satisfied that such person is no longer liable to deduct tax at source or collect tax at source. So tomorrow if you cease to be liable to deduct or collect tax, then your registration will be cancelled also. And the officer shall follow the procedure laid down for cancellation and the rules therein, which we'll see in the next lecture, how cancellation takes place. So all simple points are there. And finally the OIDR people, person who's providing OIDR service from outside India. So he also has to make an application in the prescribed form, which is different, and they will be granted registration subject to conditions and restrictions, obviously. And then there is section 28, amendment of registration. If there is any change in the particulars furnished in the original application or UIN application, registered person shall submit an application in the prescribed manner within 15 days of such change, along with documents relating to change. So new documents have to be submitted to prove the change. Like there can be change in address, there can be change in other information. Then in case of amendment of core fields of information, the proper officer may, on the basis of information furnished or as ascertained by him, approve or reject amendments in the registration particulars in the prescribed manner. Such amendments shall take effect from the date of occurrence of event warranting such amendment. So amendment will be effective from the date of the event, like the date of change of address itself. Amendment relating to following matters shall be considered as amendment in core field. So what are the core fields? Legal name of business. So if you are changing your name of business, that is a core field. It requires permission or approval of the prescribed authority. He has the power to verify and check, and he can reject also. Secondly, address of the principal place of business or additional places of business, means change in address. So change in name, change in address, or addition, deletion or retirement of partners or directors, Karta of HUF, Managing Committee, Board of Trustees, Chief Executive Officer or equivalent, responsible for the day-to-day affairs of the business. So if your main officer is changing, then that will also mean core information, and which does not warrant cancellation of registration under section 29. Obviously, this is just a sentence which does not warrant cancellation, because if the change warrants cancellation, then of course it will go for cancellation. Then there is no change, it will go in cancellation process. Means, for example, I'll give you here that like it is given a change in name. So if the name is changing because of amalgamation, the old company is getting dissolved. So in that case, it will not be a change in the registration certificate, but the old company will have to cancel its registration and the new company will have to take fresh registration. So when I say change in name, it only means change of name of the business, but not change of the person. Farooq Haque is running the business. Earlier it was called as Farooq Haque Classes. Now I am changing the name of Farooq Haque Classes to Shahrukh Haque Classes. So that will come under section 28. But if I transfer my business and the slum sale to Shah Rukh Khan, then he will need a fresh registration. My registration will cancel. However, where change relates to non-core fields of information, means other things which are non-core, registration certificate shall stand amended upon submission of the application itself. You just have to make an application and it is deemed to be done. Means the officer will not check, verify, nothing. It is deemed to be done. And any change in the mobile number or the email address, if these are changing, then they shall be carried out only after online verification. Again, the online verification will be done. Those OTPs will come and you will have to verify the OTPs. And where a change in constitution of a business results in change of PAN, if your PAN number is changing, like some new partnership firm has been formed, ABC firm has changed to PQR firm, and a new PAN will be required under income tax, then you will have to apply for fresh registration, because the PAN number is changing, so the GST and number will also change, so that will require fresh registration. It cannot be done by way of amendment, and the reason is given. The reason for the same is that GSTIN number is a PAN based. Any change in PAN would warrant new registration. Then if the proper officer fails to take any action within a period of 15 working days from the date of submission of application, or within a period of 7 working days from the date of receipt of the reply to show cause notice, the registration certificate shall stand amended, deemed amended. If it doesn't take any action, then it is deemed to be amended and made available on the common portal. An effective date of amendment and registration details can be earlier than the date of submission of the application for amendment only when the Commissioner orders the same for reasons to be recorded in writing. Means this is a notification number 75/17 which says that the effective date of amendment can be taken as earlier also, but that will require Commissioner order. Simple and actually of no use, so you can skip it also. And then the last is cancellation or suspension of registration. This I think will deal in the next lecture.